Heidi-ho, my Psycoin students! We're back with the first devlog since the game was funded on Kickstarter. Going back and comparing how I felt in my first devlog versus now, well, safe to say I'm on the moon. Thanks to everyone's love and support, I get to work on this game full-time. I'm now able to pay Mr. Programmer Caius, and I can continue to hire my sister for her music and our lovely voice actors. Thank you to everyone who helped support this project, be it through playing the demo, making cool fan art, donating to the Kickstarter, spreading the word, or just watching and liking the devlogs. It's all thanks to viewers like you. Thank you! In the time since the campaign, we've been putting nose to the grindstone on laying out the plan for the full game. As for the character models, here's the finished model of Coach Terrera. I did a lot of work for her on stream, so click that bell icon to be notified when I do more art streams. This is Madame Noiramore, the former headmistress of Noiramore Academy, who now lives in disgrace with her loyal Booksprite companion. And here is the finished model for the vendor, a mysterious character who opened a strange shop on school grounds. The first draft of the script is halfway done. Since this is such a story-focused game, I'm trying to polish the script to a shine and have been planning out various plot threads and character arcs that'll be present in our mysterious tale. But I can't reveal much to y'all about that yet. I've also made progress on more concept art. For example, Mrs. Luna's design got an upgrade. And here's the design for Secretary Bellafax. This is concept art for the rodent creatures. The females are slinky and long, since they explore the nooks and crannies of the school looking for food. The males stay home and let the babies nest in their warm fur. This is how a normal Selkie looks as compared to a corrupted Selkie. The corruption is due to mutations from something called a Psy-bomb, and low-level exposure to the Surge. But you'll learn more about those things later. Also got some concepts for the uniforms of the soldiers, and for some of Judith's outfits like her PJs and her fencing uniform. The next classroom I've been designing is the music classroom, which is heavily inspired by Rococo styles. Now to the main topic of today's update, puzzle design. Now that the demo is released, I can spoil the workings of the puzzles involved. You'd better have played or watched the demo before watching this here video. For what is basically the tutorial of this game, I wanted it to feel almost like an escape room. We start confined only to the history classroom, which, despite being a small space, is loaded with details and a lot of stuff to interact with and examine. I wanted to encourage the player to explore the room and be on the lookout for details. How could I accomplish this? My idea was the first puzzle, which is a counting puzzle. You have to count the amount of desks, cave counts, and windows in the room, and add and multiply them together to find the page number for a history book. We ran into a problem though. Some players started counting the lecterns as desks, and others couldn't find the cave hounds in the tapestry. That's why getting player feedback is helpful. So I changed the clue to read student desks and made the cave hounds on the tapestry a bit brighter. In the final game, I might just have the player find 2 numbers instead of 3, to make the first puzzle feel smoother and less frustrating to figure out which number you got wrong. But in the end, my main goal was to make players really look around the room. And I think this puzzle succeeds at that, though it needs some changes. What do you guys think? After finding the right page number, the player has to find a use for the history book, which was easy for most players to find, as the battle board mirrors the inside of the book. But there's a problem. The puzzle is almost impossible without Judith knowing what the amounts of various army units are, so the tutorial asks the player to talk with NPCs to get more knowledge. Now by this point, the player has likely already talked to the various NPCs around the room, but this part of the tutorial more plainly encourages them to do so, showing how important it will be for the rest of the game. One could find the right character pretty easily through trial and error, but I also wanted it to be obvious that the kid wearing the big navy hat would probably be the best candidate to know about military knowledge. But this kid doesn't want to talk to you unless you give him a lunch coin. Where do you get a lunch coin? Well, if you've talked with either Lydia or Gina, they need your help with something, and will give you a lunch token for your time. Let's start with Lydia. Lydia's carving some chalk because for some reason she thinks her crush will like her weird art projects. She's asking for your help, and you can oblige her if you want. You have to use a carving tool to match the chalk she's already carved. And, this was a tricky one to make. Originally, I wanted this to be a kind of drawing puzzle, where you have to use a reference to erase away at the chalk and try to match the shapes. Kaius suggested we use vertex painting to basically erase tiny polygons off of the mesh. That way, it's much easier for the system to detect the accuracy of the chalk's shape by comparing it to the polygons of the other mesh. However, this iteration had way too many polys and was much too difficult, especially with the weirdly high mouse sensitivity, which was another issue we were working on. We ended up patching the game to have the chalk use a much lower poly count, making the chalk minigame easier and more enjoyable. Now for Gina. Gina's puzzle was actually intended to be super easy. However, I was stupid. Her puzzle was just supposed to be the player looking to a sewing book for the steps of a sewing stitch, and then using the mouse to make that stitch repeatedly across the tear in the dress. But the first problem was that on some screens, the white circles that indicate where you could stitch blended in with the white lace, so we changed them to red. And then some players didn't understand that the stitch was supposed to be repeated several times across the tear. They thought it was just one stitch that was needed, and that they had to figure out which holes were the right ones. To me, it made sense that the stitch would need to be repeated, but alas, that is the folly of a puzzle designer. Everyone's brains think differently, so I have to be better at trying to accommodate for that by becoming a better designer. I think a big part of the confusion was the lack of lines showing the 3 levels of the stitch, so we altered the book's texture to reflect that better. Now, more players have been able to better understand the idea of the puzzle, though we're still having problems with mouse sensitivity that'll be fixed in the final game. What do you all think? Now that the player has a lunch coin or two, they can get the information needed from Nicholas, which comes in the form of a little note that pops up when you go back to the battleboard's puzzle screen. This is the hardest puzzle in the demo for a lot of people. Let me break it down. The idea of having some kind of tactics board as a puzzle really appealed to me, because it could help tie in the theme of the war to the start of the game, and fit the theme of the history classroom. But the clues that Judith is finding from the cook's friend are older than the Onyx War. From this, the idea of using an old history textbook as a reference guide for where to put the battleboard's figures in the present time came along. When the clue was written, the battleboard's map was different. It was painted over in the coming years. So Judith needs to read the book to figure out where the soldier figures should be placed. The guide in the book says that one figure equals a patrol. Nicholas's note says that a patrol is 20 men. Therefore, one figure equals 20 men. Going off of the rest of Nicholas's note, a platoon is 2 figures and a company is 7 figures. I thought having a bit of basic math here would add to the complexity nicely, since beyond that, it's just a puzzle involving placing figures where you're told to. Now we just follow the instructions in the book. For example, there were 2 Northbergian patrols to the far west and 1 patrol to the east of the northern canyon. We placed 2 figures here and 1 figure here by the canyon. Now, originally I hadn't labeled the river and canyon in the book, which was dumb on my end because they might not be immediately obvious, so I added labels for them. We also ended up putting a hint button to make the hit boxes for the puzzle visible, which helps if someone has maybe 1 or 2 figures just out of place. Now you just continue using the book to place the figures. 7 figures, a base, and 3 barracks on the peninsula, a company in the northeast, etc. Until gems fall out of the Rarinox's mouth and you get the next clue. Considering how difficult this was for a lot of players, I'm considering making it much simpler in the final game. What do you guys think? The next clue mentions a twinkle in Lady Noiramore's eye. Since the player very likely doesn't know who Lady Noiramore is, Judith looks up at her portrait in cutscene to give the next hint. But before getting up there, she needs someone to distract the teacher. In the process of getting the lunch coin, you've already unlocked the distraction option from at least one character, either Gina, Lydia, or both. Just ask the girl who you already helped with her puzzle, and she'll help you in exchange. The next tutorial talks about a new ability to add to our repertoire. This is the Suspended Waves ability, and it was something that I was pretty excited to add to the game. I wanted to have abilities and little flourishes that really show that this is a fantasy setting, where certain fantastical things are treated as very normal or mundane. That's why we see most of the students writing with their Resonetics. Though that was also done to make animation easier. Indeed, one of the main reasons I called this magic system Resonetics and not magic or psychic abilities is because to the people of this world, it's an everyday science that is inherently a part of everyone, not a special mystical talent. Back to the game, we see that Judith has learned enough to be able to reach higher places using her waves. She can examine several new things up here, like the tapestry, map, and portraits. Upon examining Lady Noiramore's portrait, Judith mentions that there's a hole in her eye, and, just in case the player hasn't found the pencil yet, the camera cuts down to zoom in on it. Get the pencil, use it on the portrait, and voila! 3 more gems and another clue. To me, this final puzzle is kinda Resident Evil core. It's fairly simple and requires more environmental observation. I wanted to use the big cave hound statue for a puzzle, as well as the big tapestry I'd made, since these both felt like the main pieces of thematic set dressing in this room. And since a connection of cave hounds had already been made between them using the first puzzle, it was easy for people I saw playing them on stream to connect the dots. You look at the order of the colors on the tapestry, and then do the same with the gems on the collar of the cave hound. There's one issue with this puzzle though, and that's our lack of thought for colorblindness. In the final game, we're going to work on several ideas to make it easier for colorblind people to solve puzzles like this. Maybe using a colorblind mode, or symbols with the colors. Now the last puzzle has been solved and the demo is completed. You get a note hinting at the past of the school's cook, and a mysterious blueprint for a hidden door behind stained glass. This is the first ground-up puzzle experience I've designed outside of levels using the Portal 2 creation tool or Kitty Roo's simple item combination puzzles. Watching streamers and YouTubers try it out really taught me a lot about accessibility in puzzle design and ways to make things clearer to the player. Going forward, I'm designing the final game's puzzles with more knowledge and confidence. And of course, I'll be beta testing everything thanks to the help of my beta tier supporters on Patreon and Kickstarter. If you'd like to support the game and get access to the future betas, links to Patreon and our ongoing post-goal Kickstarter are below. And if you haven't played the demo or wishlisted on Steam, that's also down in the description. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!